Look at the screen. A mouse, timid, trembling. It hides in the dark. It hates the light. It fears everything. Evolution wired it to survive by hiding. Now, look at the second mouse. Bold, exploratory. It dominates the space. Two different animals, two entirely different minds, right? Wrong. Scientists at McMaster University wanted to test a theory. They didn't touch the mice's brains, they didn't use psychological conditioning, they didn't use heavy neurological drugs, they went straight to the stomach, they sterilized their guts, they wiped out every single microbe, a completely blank biological slate. Then they performed a swap, a fecal transplant. They took the gut bacteria from the bold mouse, they injected it into the coward, they took the coward's bacteria, they injected it into the bold one, they waited. The results were terrifying. The terrified mouse stopped shaking. It stepped into the light. It explored the open arena. It was fearless. The bold mouse, it completely broke. It retreated. It cowered in the darkest corner of its cage, paralyzed. Their brains were untouched. Their genetics were unchanged, but their personalities had been entirely surgically swapped by moving bacteria from one intestine to another. Think about what that actually means. Think about you, your courage, your introversion, your unique quirks. You call it your personality. You call it your identity. You call it your soul, but you are just the host. You are a walking meat suit. Your entire personality might just be chemical exhaust produced by microscopic passengers, trillions of them, fermenting in your gut, voting on who you will be today, and you have absolutely zero say in the matter. You think you are steering the ship. You are just following their chemical orders. If courage is just a bacterial byproduct, what else is? What about your absolute darkest thoughts? What if the heavy, suffocating emptiness you feel isn't a psychological realization? What if that feeling of hopeless despair isn't a glitch in your brain? What if it's an invasive species? What if depression is contagious? We treat mental illness like a civil war, a battle fought entirely inside the brain. We blame our trauma. We blame our genetics. We blame a flawed neurology. But modern science is proving us wrong. Dead wrong. Look at serotonin, the happiness chemical, the pure fuel for joy, the engine of motivation. You think it is made in your head. It isn't. 90% of it is manufactured below, in the dark of your intestines. By them, the bacteria, they hold the master keys to your happiness, and they can take those keys away. Researchers wanted to see how far this goes. They found human patients, people suffering from severe clinical depression, the kind of heavy darkness that swallows a life whole. They took samples of their microbiome. They harvested the bacteria. Then they found the new hosts, healthy, unstressed rats, full of boundless energy, fighting hard for survival, thriving. They injected the human depression directly into the rats. They didn't traumatize the animals. They didn't isolate them. They didn't induce stress. They just changed their passengers. Within days, the healthy rats completely broke. They just gave up. They stopped swimming during survival tests. They let themselves sink. They ignored the sugar water they used to crave. They exhibited textbook crushing despair. The depression wasn't just a mood. It wasn't a tragedy. It was a physical infection. It was a highly invasive species. It was literally contagious. Think of your deepest existential dread, that hollow, hopeless emptiness you can't explain. It might not be a psychological flaw. It might not be a realization about the world. It might not be you at all. It might be a hostile biological takeover, an overpopulation of the wrong microscopic landlords, evicting your joy to build their empire. But sadness is passive. Despair is quiet. What happens when the colony gets aggressive? What happens when the passengers demand absolute power? We blame human wars on ego. We blame violence on greed. But what if human nature doesn't actually exist? What if your sudden, blinding rage, your darkest urge to dominate and destroy, is just a chemical switch being flipped, a violent command issued from the dark? Look at human history. It is soaked in blood, endless wars, brutal conquests, the desperate, violent struggle for power. We call it human nature. We blame our ego. We blame our greed. We blame the psychology of the alpha. We are lying to ourselves. The urge to dominate doesn't come from the mind. It comes from the dark. It comes from the gut. Scientists at Northwestern University found the switch, the exact trigger for violence. It isn't a thought, it is a chemical. TMA, produced exclusively by gut bacteria. They sit in the dark, breaking down your food, and they manufacture aggression. In males, this chemical travels upward. It floods the bloodstream. It invades the brain. It binds directly to the olfactory receptors, and it demands war. The researchers took a group of hyper-aggressive subjects, constantly fighting, constantly establishing dominance. They didn't use therapy. They didn't use restraints. They simply tweaked the gut bacteria. They shut down the microscopic TMA factory. The results were instantaneous. The violence completely vanished. The aggression dropped to absolute zero. The subjects became entirely peaceful, docile, harmless. Then the scientists flipped the switch back on. They restored the bacterial factory. They let the TMA flow. The peace shattered. The violent, dominant behaviors returned instantly. They fought again, like biological puppets yanked by unseen strings. Think about the blinding rage you feel, that sudden, uncontrollable fury, that deep, visceral urge to crush a rival. You think that is your pride talking? You think that is your ego defending itself? It is not. It is a microscopic colony, using your human frame as heavy artillery, engineering a social hierarchy that benefits them. You are not a warrior, you are just a hijacked weapon. But aggression still serves a purpose. It keeps the host alive. It helps you fight. What happens when the invader doesn't care if you survive? What happens when an organism needs you to die? Evolution gave you millions of years of primal instincts. The urge to run, the absolute terror of the predator, but there is a parasite out there, and it knows exactly how to delete your fear. It knows how to reach into your brain and replace your deepest terror with a fatal, irresistible attraction to your own brutal murder. Fear is a gift. It is your ultimate armor. Millions of years of evolution, wired deeply into your primal brain. It tells you to run. It tells you to hide. It keeps you alive, but it can be erased overnight. Meet Toxoplasma Gondii, a single-celled nightmare, a microscopic parasite. It has a very specific goal. It wants to reproduce, but it can only breed in one place, inside the intestines of a feline. To get there, it needs a vehicle. It needs a living host. It chooses the rat. The parasite invades the rat's brain. It doesn't just damage the tissue. It performs targeted neurosurgery. It hacks the fear center, the amygdala. It completely deletes the terror of predators. But it doesn't stop there. A fearless rat might just run away. The parasite needs the rat to die, so it rewires the brain chemistry entirely. It replaces the mortal terror of the cat with pure, irresistible sexual attraction. The rat smells the predator. It feels arousal. It feels overwhelming desire. It walks directly out into the open. Willingly, happily, it offers itself to the teeth. The parasite wins. The biological cycle continues. You are watching this and thinking about the rat. You feel sorry for the mindless animal. You think you are completely safe. You are terribly wrong. Look around you. Look in the mirror. 1/3 of the global human population is infected. Billions of walking meat suits, harboring Toxoplasma gondii right now. Scientists have tracked the human data. The parasite is highly active. It alters human dopamine pathways. It is linked to severe schizophrenia. It is linked to extreme risk-taking. You take a dangerous, fatal risk. You drive way too fast. You gamble everything you have. You call it a thrill. You call it living on the edge. You think those reckless impulses are yours. But Toxoplasma is pulling the strings. It doesn't know you aren't a rat. It is just trying to get you eaten. It is trying to finish the cycle. Who is actually in control?